Hi, everybody. I'm excited to speak to you all this morning. My partner Albert gave a talk here a few years ago, and when Steve and John reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to talk, I said to Albert, should I do this? And Albert said, oh yeah, it's an incredible group of people. These are the people that make the internet work every day, and they're probably as important as anybody. You should definitely go spend some time with them, so I'm excited to be here today. I have learned a ton of stuff from John and his colleagues at Etsy. And one of the things that I've learned from them is the value of continuous deployment and the idea that by pushing out code in real time all the time in fast, small pieces, you create more resiliency. And so this morning I thought I would make this talk an exercise in continuous deployment. As I was writing my talk, and I have to say I'd spent a little bit of time over the weekend thinking about it, and I'd sent a draft to John and Kellen and Chad at Etsy and my partner Albert and my friend and former partner Jerry, but I hadn't really written the talk. So as I was sitting down today to write it, I decided I would post it on my blog at the exact same time that I was writing it. So if any of you read avc.com, you'll have already seen all of this material, and this talk will now be redundant. But redundancy is also a good thing, as all of you know. So anyway, without any further ado, I'm going to get into the material. I'm an engineer, and I think a lot of you are probably engineers, or at least in practice are engineers. And to me, engineers are the people who build systems, scale systems, and make them resilient at scale. And I think like an engineer. I haven't done any real engineering in a long, long time, unless you include financial engineering. But that's how I think, and I really benefit in my career from being taught at an early age how to think that way. And so I went to MIT, and that's really where I kind of learned how to think this way. I was into software and computers, but my dad was a mechanical engineer, and he really encouraged me to study mechanical engineering, and so I did. I majored in mechanical engineering at MIT, and I was sort of uninterested in a lot of the stuff that I guess the intro courses and such that I took. But I think it was in my second year, my sophomore year, I took a course in systems engineering, and it was an incredible class, and it really opened my eyes to large-scale complex systems and all the interdependencies between the components in the system, and modeling those out and understanding how the system at scale performed versus the way the individual components scaled. And I was really into the fact that you got these abnormalities of behavior when you put this stuff together. And I want to read you a quote from John, a post that John Osbaugh, a post that Chad Dickerson, who's the CEO of Etsy, pointed me to as I was working through this talk this morning. John wrote a post called "Resilient Engineering Part 2." I think he wrote it about a year ago, and there's a line in there where he says, "That's the funky thing about complex systems and system thinking. Components come together to behave in different, sometimes surprising ways that they never would on their own in isolation." And that's the thing that really hooked me on systems engineering. And I took a bunch of courses as I went through my electives, and I guess if I had a sub-major in mechanical engineering, it would have been systems engineering, and so I'm really into it. So tech ops is systems engineering as applied to large-scale computer systems. And all of the sort of foundational concepts of systems thinking and systems engineering are well understood and well developed and perfected in a good tech ops team. So I think all of you, even if you've never studied systems engineering, understand it at a gut level. And what I'm here today to tell you is that managing companies, is systems engineering as applied to a large and growing organization. And what I want to talk about today are the similarities between tech ops and managing a company. And the reason I want to do that is that more and more we in the venture capital business are seeing technical people, such as yourselves, starting companies. And Mark Andreessen has a great line about this. I think it's Mark. It might be Ben. I don't know. The two of them are kind of like this single unit in my mind sometimes. But either Mark or Ben has said that we think, I think this was back sort of in their founding sort of mantra blog post that they wrote when they first introduced Andreessen Horowitz. He said, we think it's easier to teach a technical person how to be a good manager than it is to teach a good manager how to be technical. And I think that's a growing acknowledgement in the venture business that the truth of that. And so I think many of you may find yourself one day starting an organization or leading an organization. Chad Dickerson, who was the VP of engineering at Etsy, is now the CEO of Etsy, and I think that's not an unusual thing, and I think we'll see more and more of that over time. So what I want to do is I want to go through 8 rules of good tech ops and then talk about what the analog is in good management. And if you've seen the blog post, then you're already ahead of me on these. But what I'm going to try to do is maybe give a couple of real-world examples. By the way, this is all new material. I'm trying out new material today, so I don't know how long this is going to take, and we're going to try to fit it to the 15 minutes I've got, and we'll see. I've got a little clock here, so I think we're doing okay. So the first one, and probably the most important one of all, is that things that work well at small scale break at large scale. Okay, we all know that. I mean, that's the truism of your world. And of course, the analog to that in managing a company, leading and running an organization, is that you need different people, you need different processes, and you need different systems as a company scales. And the things that work when you're a 5-person team or a 10-person team are just not going to work when you're a 100-person team or a 500-person team. And unfortunately, the people who worked when you were a 5-person team or a 10-person team are probably not going to work when you're a 100-person team or a 500-person team. There was an excerpt in the New York Times this weekend of a Nick Bilton book about Twitter. I don't know if anybody read it, but it was kind of interesting, and it sort of magnified the fact that Twitter and the early team, nobody from the early team is still there, and there were a lot of revolving doors, and a lot of the people who were there in the very beginning left, and some left under painful circumstances and so on and so forth. But I think if you look at Twitter today, you see a large organization that's functioning fairly well, not perfectly, certainly, but fairly well. And going back to that 3, 4, 5-person team that built the first version, there's a lot of changes that go on in that journey, and you just have to swap things out. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is that, and I got this rule from Greg Pass, who was he was the VP of engineering at Twitter that really kind of got Twitter to stop going down all the time. And what happened was Twitter bought Greg's company called Surmise, largely for the search functionality that they had. Twitter had no search at the time. And I said to Jack Dorsey, who was running the company, I said, how are we going to integrate Surmise? And he said, Fred, we're not going to integrate Surmise. Surmise is going to integrate us. And in fact, what he did was he put Greg in charge of engineering and said to Greg, figure it out. And the thing that Greg said and then executed and implemented is probably something that all of you understand really well, which is you need to instrument your system so you can see when things are reaching the breaking point well before they break. And that's the first thing that Greg's new engineering organization did. They instrumented Twitter, and they really built good data to see which subsystems were going to fail, and then rewrote or improved or re-architected those subsystems. And they did that again and again and again and again and again. And of course, most of you probably are like, duh, of course, that's what you would do. But in any case, they hadn't done that, and when they did it, things got better. And so the management analog to that is you need to implement employee feedback systems, ideally real-time feedback systems, like walking around the office and taking people to lunch and just asking them what's going on. And then you can measure, and then you need to somehow have some methodology for yourself or the organization to do some trend analysis, and you can see how the organization is functioning over time. And if you don't do that, it's going to be very difficult to be a good leader and manager. Rule 3 is there's always one problematic component in a system that causes the majority of the scaling problems. and must be rewritten. I was at one of our portfolio companies about a month ago, and the tech lead who had built a lot of the system, this was about a 10-person organization, had built this huge diagram of the system on the whiteboard, and there was a couple of new engineers who had just joined, and he was kind of walking them through the system. And one of the engineers said, it's this thing where all the problems are. And he pointed to one subsystem. He said, like, all of our bugs are in here, and all our problems happen when this thing, gets involved. And I'm sure you've all seen that. All systems kind of have that. And the analogy there is that team members, particularly the super talented ones that cause friction and pain in the organization, need to be transitioned out no matter what the cost. I'll tell another story here. I'm going to get rushed for time, so I'm going to speed through the last of it. But I remember a couple of years ago, we had all of the founders of our portfolio in a room, and we were going through talking about lessons learned, and the CEO of one of the companies said, we had this guy, he was our tech lead, he built most of the product, he was an asshole. And we could never imagine getting rid of him, but at one point, everybody in the company other than him came up to me and said, I'm quitting if you don't get rid of this guy. I got rid of him, and nothing changed. In fact, the next week was better, and it was better, and it was better, and better. And he said, the moral of the story is, I'd rather have a hole in my organization than an asshole. I would tell you whose line that was, but then you could triangulate on who the asshole was, and I don't want to do that. So anyway, he'll know. He's a great guy. Maybe the asshole is too. Okay, number 4, there is no silver bullet to scaling systems. And everybody's like, well, we just need to re-architect it, or we need to, port from MySQL to Cassandra or MongoDB or whatever. Everyone has like this silver bullet. This architectural change is going to change everything. It doesn't. And the management analog to that is there's no such thing as a world-class CEO that you can bring into your company and all of a sudden everything's going to work beautifully. It just doesn't happen that way. It's not one thing, it's everything that causes things to get better. Number 5 is loose coupling of components is critical. You can't have one component fail and take the entire system down. And the management analogy to that is build resiliency into your organization, into your processes, into your systems. Do not let your organization be so tightly coupled that it'll fail. Number 6, something that my former partner, Jerry Colonna, who's now a management coach, gave me, is that blameless postmortems are the key to learning from a tech ops crisis. And I really believe that's really important, and there's a lot of research and a lot of data about this. Big organizations like the military and the FAA and people obviously leverage this. And the management analog to this is that fear-driven organizations do not scale. If everybody's running around worried that they're about to get fired or they're about to get called out in an all-hands meeting and made to feel like shit, they're just not going to share broadly, what's going on in their world, and then everything will just, creak to a halt. Number 7 is overreacting to a crisis is likely to make it worse. Systems down, all of a sudden the engineer's in there, changing stuff, and more likely than not, they're making it worse, not better. And so the management analog to that is calm in the face of adversity is one of the signature traits of a great organizational leader. And I've seen it time and time again. Even if your stomach is boiling and you think everything's coming down on you, you have to sort of project calm, and that will cause everyone else to be calm. Number 8, and the last one, overbuilt systems are hard to implement, manage, and scale. We've all seen it. Happens all the time. We see it in our portfolio companies. The management analog is build the organization you need when you need it, not well in advance of when you need it. So we can go on and on. We could play this game for another hour if we wanted to. There's going to be a bunch of great talks today with all kinds of ahas and insights about better ways to do things. And what I would challenge you to do is to, when you hear one of these things, think what the analog is in managing people and managing large people systems. Because the thing that I know, and I think you probably know or are finding out or are going to find out, is that as important as the systems are that you manage today, the most important systems you're ever going to manage are people systems, and that's really what you should be thinking about as you think about your career and getting better. I want to, I sort of did this already, but I want to thank my partner Albert, Jerry Colonna, and Chad, John, and Kellen from Etsy for reviewing an early draft of this talk and giving me a lot of my best material. I have 10 seconds left, so the timing here was good. I feel like I rushed a little bit through the end, but I think this is a meaty topic, and I enjoyed talking about it today, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Thank you very much.